Welcome back to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss news and views about pop culture, science fiction, fantasy, food, cooking, the outdoors, and more. I wanted to take a moment to thank everyone who has recently subscribed to the channel. Thank you very much for your support. Another company has decided to more fully embrace woke identity politics, and that company is Wizards of the Coast, the owners of games like Magic the Gathering and Dungeons & Dragons. The company itself is a subsidiary of Hasbro, who is responsible for the movie Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, which flopped spectacularly in theaters earlier this year. As I have spoken about in several previous videos, including the first one that I released on April 4th, which was immediately after the movie's opening weekend. And during its opening weekend, the movie only grossed $37.2 million domestically and $32.9 million internationally for a global opening of only $70.1 million. With a production budget of $150 million, multiplying that by 2.5 gets an estimated mid-range break-even point of around $375 million, to account for the 50% of gross ticket sales that movie theaters keep for themselves, as well as the additional costs of marketing the movie and other miscellaneous costs that the studio pays above and beyond the production budget. In that April 4th video, I had initially projected that the movie may only earn around $175 million, and that consequently it would more than likely flop. And I was probably among the first people that said that the movie was probably going to flop. Not long thereafter, I revised my calculated projections a couple of times as more data about the movie's box office became available, and I settled on a projected final global gross box office of $214 million for the movie in a video that I had released on April 23rd. And at no point did any of my calculated projections ever suggest that Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves could ever break even. As of right now, more than a month after I calculated that final projection, the movie, which is still playing in around 161 theaters in the US, has only earned globally $208.1 million, which of course is nowhere near the $375 million that it would need to break even, but it is very close to my final calculated projection. But why did the movie flop? In the months leading up to the movie's release, Wizards of the Coast had angered many Dungeons & Dragons gamers by wanting to make controversial changes to the game's OGL. While the company ultimately abandoned their controversial intentions, they had succeeded in driving many gamers away from continuing to play and support Dungeons & Dragons, which included a significant loss of interest in the movie long before it opened. Then, in early March, which was several weeks before the movie's release, the film's directors, Jonathan Goldstein and John Daly, had admitted that they had deliberately emasculated the movie's male leads, but claimed that it was done to be humorous and not to be woke. Well, I don't think that many people actually believed their explanation. And combined with the OGL controversy, there was simply no way that Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves could be theatrically successful. And much of the blame clearly rests with the numerous bad business decisions that were made by Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro. And on the heels of their failed Dungeons & Dragons movie, Wizards of the Coast has now decided in a new card game that they're making, and that's based on J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, to race swap one of the most beloved characters in Tolkien's epic books, Aragorn. Aragorn is a key character in J.R.R. Tolkien's blockbuster book, The Lord of the Rings, as well as in Peter Jackson's subsequent and highly successful movie adaptations. In the book, Tolkien described Aragorn as being white, and in the film he was played by the Caucasian actor Viggo Mortensen. In Tolkien's words, he was said to have a shaggy head of dark hair flecked with gray, and in a pale, stern face, a pair of keen gray eyes. Though the students of Tolkien's lore were divided, they all agreed that Aragorn is of Númenórean descent, a group that is widely understood to be fair-skinned. But Wizards of the Coast has taken it upon themselves to race swap Aragorn, so that in their new playing card deck, he's black. This is just race baiting, one Twitter user wrote in response. A publicity stunt in the worst taste. One user questioned what all the uproar was about and why anyone cared, to which another responded, one could ask why people cared enough to change it to begin with. This constant changing is getting old and it only goes one way. You don't see Asian characters being changed into Hispanic. It's always white into black every single time. And that's absolutely true. And there are many other recent examples of this happening. As I have talked about in several videos that I have recently released, against everything that has been carefully studied, peer-reviewed, and archaeologically demonstrated, Jada Pinkett Smith, who has no background or training in Egyptian history, decided that Queen Cleopatra was black and not white Macedonian Greek in a phony documentary that she produced for Netflix that has been totally panned by both critics and audiences alike. In fact, her Queen Cleopatra series has the lowest score on Rotten Tomatoes of anything else reviewed on the site, a 3% audience score. Then there's Amazon's total bastardization of Tolkien's Middle-earth in their crap streaming series entitled The Lord of the Rings of Power, that has numerous race-swapped characters of which none are supported by physical descriptions provided by Tolkien himself. And in the video that I released just before this one, I talked about Disney's release of their live-action remake of the movie The Little Mermaid, starring Halle Bailey as a race-swapped mermaid Ariel, who in the original 1989 animated movie was white and red-haired. The excuse that is always used by those deciding to race-swap beloved characters is to modernize them for today's audiences. If that's the case, then why is Jada Pinkett Smith's fakecumentary being totally rejected by everyone? And why did most people who watched any of Amazon's Lord of the Rings of Power abandon it long before its first season ended and give it terrible Nielsen ratings and horrible audience scores? And why then is The Little Mermaid more than likely going to flop in theaters? As I talked about in my previous video, the shill media sites initially didn't want to talk about the fact that the movie is doing horribly overseas, and not just in China, where the film has only earned a pathetic $2.78 million, which is only 1.5% of the movie's global box office as of the time that I'm recording this video. People want to see characters as their creators envisioned them, as well as historical figures for who they actually were. But just like a smash and grab robbery, the woke identity politics mob robs the identities of fictional and now historical figures too, to try and recreate them in their own images before attempting to sell them on as modernized versions that nobody actually wants. And it's a total double standard, because the same woke identity politics mob that wants to race swap any beloved white characters with black ones would scream and complain if a black character was race swapped with a white one. In their totally justified collective anger, Egyptians were correct in how they described what Jada Pinkett Smith and her Queen Cleopatra show's director Tina Garavi did to Cleopatra in their crap show, blackwashing. And Tina Garavi admitted in an article that she wrote for Variety herself that the reason that they race-swapped Cleopatra was as a political act. So it had absolutely nothing to do with historical accuracy. It was done solely to push woke identity politics. Now, Wizards of the Coast is doing the exact same thing by blackwashing J.R.R. Tolkien's beloved character Aragorn, just like Amazon, which has been blackwashing fictional races that Tolkien clearly described in his written works, notes, and letters as being fair-skinned. But it hasn't worked out well for Amazon, and it has definitely not worked out well for Jada Pinkett Smith, and it is most definitely not working out well for Disney's The Little Mermaid either. So I highly doubt that Wizards of the Coast will sell many of their card games featuring race-swapped Tolkien characters. But they'll be able to add the losses from the unsold cards to the tens of millions of dollars that they lost on their flopped Dungeons & Dragons movie. I'm sure Hasbro shareholders will be thrilled. Thanks for watching today, and a huge thanks to everyone who has subscribed to our channel. We appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button, and please feel free to share a comment. If you'd like to see more of our videos in the future and help support this channel, please press the red subscribe button, and please press the bell to receive notifications for new content. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter by clicking on the links in the description. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.